My name is Joe McQuaid, and I'm the president of the Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications. And that's all I do for the place is that, which is nothing. The school has just successfully completed its fall series of classes. And they did it at numbers that we haven't seen since before, what was it called? COVID or something hit? There is information about the school, and especially about the sponsors who are making this event possible and making the school possible in your program bookers. So you can take those with you. Maybe you can get Jonathan Martin to sign them. No, he's not doing that. He's just going to do the book. There are several reasons for the school's success, including the caliber of the teachers that we have who are experts in their own various fields, the caliber of the students who actually want to be at the school and keep coming back and are great ambassadors for us. But I also want to let you in on a little secret, since the theme of this event is something to do with the First Amendment. I want to let you know the real reason for the school's success. It is our vast and complicated administrative team, which consists of exactly two people. Executive Director Laura Simoes and Office Manager Linda Walkowitz. They're both here, and I wish they would both stand so we can give them a round of applause. Thank you. As some of you may know, when Mrs. Loeb started this school more than 20 years ago, she had a couple of things in mind. One was to improve communications among the people of the state. Mission accomplished, Mrs. Loeb. We have a lot of great courses which a lot of people take, and that has helped a great deal with improving communications. It's also the liaisons that Laura and her team have been able to create with other entities in the state, other newspapers, news media, and nonprofits, and of late, a really successful job with Solutions Journalism Lab, which you may see in your own newspaper. It funds various reporters to do particular tasks which not only write about a subject, but they don't just criticize them, they look for solutions. I think it's part of the future of journalism. It's not easy, but it works, right, Mike? Mike Cody's there from the Union Leader. He's worked on the Solutions Journalism program with Mike Cousineau in business for a number of years now. Mrs. Loeb's other reason was her love for the First Amendment. Goes nice if you're trying to run a newspaper and have controversial opinions. She also wanted to protect and advance the First Amendment for others, which is really the reason why we are here this afternoon, is in a long line of these now, I think we've had 20 of them, to recognize and honor some individual or entity that has advanced the First Amendment, which is so important to all of us. I'm going to bring up now Mr. Tim Wade, who's the regional president of M&T Bank, and he's got his personal number on every card, he tells me, by mistake. M&T Bank has done two extraordinary things, probably more, but two that I like. One is they acquired People's United Bank this year, and secondly, they've stepped up to continue to be the presenting sponsor of this event, and that means so much to the school. Mr. Wade, I can't thank you enough.
Kind words. You'd be pleased to know I got the cutest video the other day from my 4-year-old granddaughter as she did the Pledge of Allegiance all the way from start to finish from preschool. So they're teaching it there. But thank you all. Thank you all for being here with us. It's so nice to see the smiling faces again for a change after a couple of crazy years. I'm Tim Wade, as Joe said, president of M&T Bank and the proud presenting sponsor for today's event. We've been the major sponsor of this event since 2009 in our former iteration as People's United Bank and now as M&T Bank. I know I'm the new face stepping in for the irreplaceable Diane Mercier, but you need to know that my wife was born in Laconia and raised in Manchester. So I've been hanging around the live free or die state for many years, and my wife's a union leader lover. So there you go. More importantly, perhaps, the M&T bankers that support our communities here in New Hampshire are still the bankers that you've known for years, all from People's United, and we kept them all on, and I'm the only M&Ter here. So I do want to say that we proudly continue to support the mission of the Nackey S. Loeb School, which works hard to educate students about the First Amendment, journalism, and communications. Together, we invest in the growth and sustainability of the businesses and the communities we serve. M&T Bank places a high premium on impact. The School of Communications delivers on our investment as their First Amendment award recognizes those who have made a significant impact in our communities. As such, we are in very good company here today. I'm grateful to see so many New Hampshire nonprofit, business, and civic leaders come together to celebrate the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So, like you did the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to read the First Amendment to you. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications is one resource in our community which not only celebrates the First Amendment and our rights protected therein, but also educates us about our constitutional freedoms. At today's event and every day, the school offers free educational resources to help us all be stronger, more clear communicators. See, I slowed down there. Participating in our government and using our First Amendment freedoms is great responsibility. We can't do it alone. As part of our shared messaging during the bank's transition and bringing on People's United into our process, we would often say, together we can. Together we can is also a good way to think about this imperfect experiment of democracy. As we learn, grow, and improve our communities, we can look at our leaders like those being honored here today to help us get through it. Thank you all for your commitment to the Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications. Together we can celebrate the First Amendment and learn how to be better communicators, improve how we engage and participate in our own government, and enhance our support for the free flow of ideas and information by building civic engagement through real and active participation. Thank you for being here. I hope you will enjoy today's program. I would have liked to leave you with some quote that I knew, but I'm out of time. Laura's given me the... So I'll just give you the quick line from Braveheart, freedom.
It's a hard act to follow. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Licata. I'm the Director of Government Relations at Eversource here in New Hampshire. And on behalf of all of our employees, I'm honored to be with you today. Eversource has been a proud supporter of the Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications since 2003. Eversource's mission is to provide safe and reliable energy service to our customers. And we take our responsibility to support New Hampshire's residents and our customers during these unusual times very seriously. Through the Eversource Energy Foundation, we support organizations like the Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications that provide a meaningful and sustainable impact to our communities and our customers. The Nackey S. Loeb School's goal is to help people communicate more effectively with an appreciation of the right to free speech granted to them by the First Amendment. This is why we are proud to support and continue to support this vital organization. The First Amendment Award is an opportunity to celebrate a New Hampshire individual or group that has advanced or exercised their First Amendment rights in an extraordinary way. This year's First Amendment Award honoree is Gilles Bissonnette. Gilles is the legal director at the ACLU here in New Hampshire. He was nominated for his work with stakeholders to improve the public's right to access to information so individuals and groups can hold government accountable. Gilles was chosen by a volunteer group of judges in support of the Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications. And you can learn more about those judges and the award in your program. To learn more about Gilles and his work, please enjoy the following video presentation.
Gilles is like a jack of all trades. He does it all. So he does the litigation work. He does legislative work. He also does educational work. He represents clients. He'll advise clients, point clients in the right direction if it's not a service that we can offer here. So he's pretty much doing it all across the board.
His efforts are absolutely relentless, and his brief writing, his oral advocacy are some of the best I've seen in my 45 years of lawyering.
He's always trying to make sure that the environment and the people around him are feeling safe, welcome, heard. He's fun to be around. Yeah, he's just, when you always see Gilles, you always see a smile on his face, and that's Gilles.
You know, for me personally, I took this job because I wanted to be able to have a positive influence in the community in which I lived. And this is really an amazing state, a small state where you can have an outsized impact working for any type of public interest organization. And so I loved the idea of living in this state and working for an organization that has really a broad reach, works on multiple issues, and tries to help make New Hampshire a better place, particularly for folks from historically marginalized communities and identities. And it's the best decision I've ever made taking this job, and can't imagine ever leaving, to be honest.
Our civil liberties are guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, particularly in the First Amendment: free speech, association, petition the government for a redress of grievances, and free press, of course. And in order to have meaningful free speech, we need information in order to formulate our opinions. So the more information the public has about how the government is operating, the more intelligent will be our choices come time to cast a ballot, for example, or to speak out against what we believe to be governmental either abuse or misconduct or a great job.
He wants transparency, he wants accountability, and he wants the community to be able to engage in conversations. So he's pursued a lot of things in those areas.
First Amendment, free speech, government accountability is really the core, one of the core areas that we prioritize here in New Hampshire, and that our organization has prioritized since its inception. The ability to not only speak freely about issues of the day, particularly political issues, other contemporary issues, but the ability to do so in an informed way, which means not only that you have the ability to speak, but you have the ability to learn what the government is doing, learn what the government is up to, so you can engage in speech to praise the government, to criticize the government, to hold the government accountable. And that's always been core to our mission, and since I've been in this role for the past 9 years, has been one of my chief priorities, and among the chief priorities of every aspect of our office, including our other lawyers and our policy team. So the cases that we try to bring, if we ultimately obtain a favorable result, the hope is that that result will have an impact on so many other individuals in the state who are not necessarily a part of the lawsuit. And that really is one of the chief kind of traits of the cases that we bring, and is reflected in, I think, all of our First Amendment cases and all of our public records cases. We bring a lawsuit trying to make sure that a police department produces a disciplinary report of an officer who was terminated. The benefit of that particular case is not only to obtain those records in that case, to obtain those records for the public or the press or for our own organization, but it's to make sure that the other 200 police departments in New Hampshire, when a similar request is made by a citizen who doesn't have our resources, that department will produce that information.
Thanks to lawyers like Gilles Bissonnette and judges who have transformed the law over the years, we have a much better system in New Hampshire today in terms of finding out about governmental activity than we have had, again, in the past 45 years that I've been involved with the law.
Probably the ballot selfie case, which tends to get talked a lot about, which was, again, kind of one of our core First Amendment cases, which dealt with the ability of an individual who goes in the polling place and is excited about voting. Particularly young people, they'll go in, it's their first time voting, and they want to snap a photo of their ballot, and they want to tell the world, I did this, I voted. It's very powerful. A picture speaks 1,000 words. We had a law on the books at the time that said you can't publish that photo. And even where that photo is no evidence to criminal activity, right? And, we filed a lawsuit, and it was among the first in the country challenging those types of laws, and were successful. And that case, we prevailed at the First Circuit. The Supreme Court denied review, and, it's been nice to kind of to see that in the entire First Circuit, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine, that people have that right because of a case we brought. And I think that was probably the most high-profile kind of core First Amendment free speech case that I did early in my career. And we've tried to kind of leverage that, right, to make sure that individuals have the First Amendment right to record law enforcement, which is critical to hold law enforcement accountable, and also even to vindicate law enforcement with respect to how they responded to particular situations. Making sure that people have the right in public meetings to criticize local officials without fear of being arrested. So we've done all those cases because, again, the ability to speak truth to power, to criticize or praise the government is so critical to our First Amendment protections. And we've had to do cases on all those areas.
What is important about the change in the law that Attorney Bissonnette's efforts have created is that now the courts are directed by the Supreme Court to conduct what's called a balancing test. The public's interest in disclosure versus the privacy interests in the governmental agency or actor.
For 27 years, from 1993 to 2020, we had no ability to get access to disciplinary records of government employees in this state. Zero. And I think one of the things that I'm really the most excited about, having been a part of a big team and accomplishing this goal, was overturning that 27-year period, which what I kind of call the dark ages of New Hampshire's public records law period, where we just couldn't learn if a police officer was disciplined. We couldn't learn why, which is really critical. What if that police officer's on the force? And the public may have concerns about that. There was no ability to hold, say, a police department accountable in that context. But this applies far beyond just police. I think we tend to think about it a lot in the context of police. But let's say, for example, there's an investigation about how a school district responded to allegations of sexual misconduct by a former teacher. And a report's done, compiling, did the district respond appropriately or not? For 27 years, New Hampshire couldn't get access to that type of information. So I think we're all really, really proud that we were able to change the law and shed light on just what the government is up to. And I would also note that, again, it was a complete collaborative team effort. Not only were there other members of our staff, Henry Klomatowicz, and others involved, but these were all done in collaboration with media outlets, which I'm really proud of. The Union Leader, the Concord Monitor, Seacoast News, everyone was involved, recognized the importance of it, and they helped lead the way to make New Hampshire, I think, a freer state.
Mrs. Loeb founded her school here in Manchester because she felt that education about civics and our Bill of Rights, particularly the First Amendment, just wasn't being taught sufficiently, particularly in high schools. But to me, it's from kindergarten on, kids should be schooled and educated on our democratic republic, how it works and why it works. So Gilles has that passion, I know that much. But, you know, I don't know if he comes from a family of lawyers or not, but it wouldn't surprise me because he's so adept at learning the law, knowing the law, writing the law, and articulating the law. It's a rare combination.
Protecting the civil liberties of like the people that he's around, specifically when it comes to the First Amendment issues, that's one of the hills that, you know, Gilles will die on defending. And I think that is very admirable of him, especially in this day and age when it seems that having conversations has become so hard that you can't do that. So I'm honored to work around someone that's, you know, looking to make sure that we can continue these conversations.
You know, when I first took this job in 2013, there was a banned book week. We had banned book week in New Hampshire and nationally. And we would give presentations and talk about banned books. But it always seemed a little bit, in my view, and I was wrong at the time, a little bit kind of disconnected from like kind of the core issues that we were maybe fighting on of the day. But a helpful reminder that these issues have continued to pop up in the United States. Well, now in 2022, we were dealing with banned books. You know, in one of the most kind of overt ways that I've seen in my tenure here at the ACLU. And it's just a reminder that no, these fights are always going to be ongoing. And there'll always be a role for our organization, not only to litigate these matters in court and to advocate at the legislature, but to just educate the public as to what their rights are. And I think that, again, is one of the core values of our organization. And we'll continue to do it. I know for as long as I'm here and as long as we exist.
Please join me in congratulating the 2022 Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications First Amendment Award honoree, Gilles Bissonnette.
Congratulations.
Thank you all so much. It's surreal, frankly, to see a video made about yourself and your organization. And I just want to say it's just such an honor to be here to receive an award whose recipients have also, frankly, included some of my own personal heroes. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see prior recipients of this award, but includes folks like First Amendment lawyer Bill Chapman and obviously the late James Foley, who sacrificed everything so we could be informed. And it's also an honor to share the stage today with NHPR and its amazing reporters who have produced quality, accountability journalism in the face of legal threats and even vandalism directed at them and their families. So many people have helped me and the ACLU try to improve government transparency. Some are here, some are far away, some are not with us, but still in our hearts. And in our work, and the work of everyone in this room, all of us, we all know this, right? We have special people in our lives who have loved us, given us strength, given us support, tough talk, sometimes the push we needed to soldier on. No one does any of this work alone. I want to thank my wife, Reagan, so much, who's here today, who allows me to be me and supported me and sacrificed me for me and our lifelong journey together. And want to thank, of course, my parents. My mom is here, Sharon Bissonnette, and my father, Guy Bissonnette. They nurtured me every step of the way, gave me the tools to, I think, channel my naturally rebellious instincts into one of the few careers that rewards that type of perspective. So I'm very, very thankful. Because we all know that our families share in the burdens and difficulties of the work we do. And in the case of NHPR journalists who we're recognizing today, we know that the burdens on family in doing this work is real. And so I'm so grateful to have a supportive family and recognize that that's a privilege that not necessarily everyone has. The work that the ACLU has done in this space to make government records more accessible has always been a team effort. These wins, they don't belong to the ACLU. They belong to the news outlets. They belong to the public at large, who we've collaborated with. And I'm especially grateful, frankly, for the ability to work with so many amazing people. ACLU Senior Staff Attorney Henry Clementowicz, who litigated the recent Provenza public records win. Attorney Greg Sullivan, who you saw on the video, who is litigating all these cases too, as well as Rick Galliuso, who co-counseled some of these cases with us. So they have all had a tremendous impact on the law, and want to thank just everyone at the ACLU team, Devin Chafee, Joseph Liskaz, everyone who's here today, Jennifer, Jason, Sengyo, Paul. It's just so wonderful to see you all here today, and I'm just grateful to be a part of your team. And I do want to thank the union leader as well. The largest statewide newspaper in the state, we all know that. Without their statewide coverage, all of us, I think, would be truly lost as to what is happening in the state of New Hampshire. It's been a privilege to do many of these cases with them, and as I said in a brief that was just filed yesterday, in fact, quote, "The union leader opinion section is among the most prominent and important marketplaces of ideas in New Hampshire. It gives a platform to ordinary people and presidential candidates," end quote. And I firmly believe that, even if I may sometimes disagree with the opinion section. But that's what the First Amendment right is all about at the end of the day. And in fact, if you see a lot of ACLU briefs on public records issues, what you will see are citations and demonstrating the public interest to all the reporting that is being done in this state. And it is really amazing, and I feel so fortunate that even in this very difficult media landscape, that we have such a talented group of dedicated journalists, and proud to be a resource to help them in their journey to make New Hampshire more accountable. And the union leader really, in addition, has been among the leaders in successfully arguing that the people have a right to know what the government is up to. And in fact, anyone who's done research in this area of the law will see case after case, union leader versus agency A, union leader versus agency B. They have stood up, along with other outlets, stood up for the principle of government accountability that, of course, doesn't just apply to law enforcement. It applies to every agency. It applies to school districts, city councils, everywhere in between. Of course, it's critical to hold these agencies accountable, because if we don't, our democracy crumbles. The work to protect the First Amendment and ensure that the public's right of access is secure is more critical now than ever. Many government agencies in this state, fortunately not all, but many, still treat public records requests with a presumption of secrecy, not transparency. And the repeated attacks on journalists for doing their job, whether it's vandalism, whether it's defamation lawsuits designed to chill criticism and sources, these are happening and they need to end. Our rights under the First Amendment do not enforce themselves. They only mean something when people, all of us, stand up and to defend them. So I'm so excited to keep doing this work with everyone in this room today. I want to thank the Loeb School, Laura Simoes, who does an amazing, amazing job leading this organization and making sure that our freedoms are safe, and even more importantly, educating the public and reporters about what our freedoms mean. That is the core value of this school, and it is doing amazing, amazing work. And I want to thank, of course, Judges Rod Doherty and Supreme Court Justice Richard Galway as well, who were the judges. I didn't know this was coming, but I'm very, very grateful to everyone in the Loeb School, and I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you.
My name is Katie McQuaid, and I'm sorry that Laura's voice is not cooperating today. She was supposed to give this award, but I feel very honored that I get to, because it's being given to an organization that I'm very passionate about. I'm also a longtime supporter and member of the Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications, and I'm standing in for Laura today to present the Quill and Ink Award. This award is not given annually, but is reserved to honor significant contributions to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. This year, New Hampshire Public Radio is honored with a Quill and Ink Award. The First Amendment establishes a free, foundational part of our republic. Yet, we have seen the demonization of journalists and the very work of reporting which earned the press an honored place in our Constitution. Assaults on reporters and reporting have not stopped with ugly words. Across the country, and even here in New Hampshire, there has been a rising tide of threats and physical violence targeting journalists pursuing their mission of public service. In 2022, journalists from New Hampshire Public Radio were subjected to repeated attacks, not at work, but at their homes. Bricks were tossed through windows, vicious language was spray painted across doors and walls. After each of these events, the targeted journalists went right back to work, producing news for the people of the Granite State alongside their colleagues in the NHPR newsroom. And NHPR, undeterred, has continued the work that the people of New Hampshire have come to count on over the past 40 years. Not for being attacked, but for standing up to the intimidation and threats and courageously engaging in the daily act of journalism, we honor New Hampshire Public Radio with the 2022 Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications Quill and Ink Award. And here to accept the award is NHPR's President and CEO, Jim Schachter.
So you get two. Yeah.
I was going to say what an honor it was to be here alongside Gilles, but now I was about to get his award also. So, but really, newsrooms across the state and across New England are deeply indebted to Gilles and the ACLU for your work on behalf of transparency and a free, unfettered press. So it's humbling to share this day with you. And I know, by the way, that Bill Chapman, NHPR's chair emeritus, wanted to be here today. And Bill's still in his 80s, a very active lawyer, and had a last-minute conflict, so he wanted to extend well wishes to the ACLU as well, and to the Nackey Loeb School. You've heard why we're here. I'm here to accept this honor on behalf of the journalists of NHPR because, frankly, they're reluctant to be applauded for the events that brought them to the judge's attention. As you've heard, one of our investigative reporters on our document team and her boss, our news director, were the subjects of these acts of vandalism and threats at their homes, not at work, at their homes this past spring that remain under investigation by local, state, and federal law enforcement. I hope that they find the coward responsible. They're working on it. Now, after months of threats that began pre-publication, we've also become the target of a defamation suit. Not just New Hampshire Public Radio, but our journalists individually and most outrageously, a number of our sources, filed by the former owner of Granite Recovery Centers, the state's biggest opioid addiction treatment network. The document team exposed multiple allegations that he engaged in sexual misconduct, abusive leadership, taking retaliation. I'm confident we will prevail in that lawsuit, but you can imagine what it will cost us. In money, sure, but in time and energy and in the effort it will take to retain the confidence of those sources, our sources, under this kind of intense pressure. I met last week with the leader of one of New Hampshire's leading advocacy organizations in the field of substance misuse prevention. She told me that the issues at Granite Recovery Centers were well known to people in treatment centers in New Hampshire, but that no one felt they could come forward because of the political, economic, and safety risks. She said to me, unsolicited, that without NHPR's reporting, the problems at Granite Recovery Centers would not have received a public airing and that they desperately needed to be aired. That's what's being honored here today, I think. Not that journalists can become victims for doing their jobs, as pitiful as that is. Rather, what's worthy of honor is the courage that journalists demonstrate by doing their jobs and by doing their jobs in the public interest. At NHPR, our vision is that through trustworthy journalism, we enrich people's lives and build healthier, stronger communities in New Hampshire and beyond. Our strategy in the pursuit of that vision is to act courageously, to report the hard stories, to reach out to communities that we haven't always served well, to innovate in the ways that we report and present news and information. Happily, luckily, you, our listeners, our readers, our viewers on Instagram and TikTok, you have the courage to join us in this work, to be partners in the search for truth, to take the risk of thinking for yourselves, the risk of acknowledging that the work of building community requires open hearts and open minds. So, on behalf of our journalists and our listeners and our readers and our supporters, thank you to the judges, and thanks to the Nackey S. Loeb School of Communications for this award.
Good afternoon. I'm Howard Brodsky, and I'm chairman of CCA Global Partners. I'm also co-founder of the Brodsky Prize for Excellence in Student Journalism. Today, I will be introducing to our excellent speaker today, and we're so fortunate to have it. If there's one thing the Nackey Loeb School has done year after year, is have speakers which are so pertinent to the subjects of today's needs in our society. The First Amendment of the Constitution, we codify a free press. A free press is essential to a healthy democracy, one where accurate, factual information drives civic participation. The next generation of journalists is out there in our schools, learning and looking to us for support to help ensure a strong future. In that spirit, my son Jeff and I established the Brodsky Prize to honor excellence in student journalism. The Brodsky Prize is proud to be a sponsor of the First Amendment Award. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to give you some insight into why this First Amendment was so important to Jeff. When he was a junior in high school in 1990 at Manchester Central High School, he was co-editor of the award-winning newspaper, The Little Green. The newspaper wanted to cover the results of the freshman elections. The school announced the winners, but they would not release the vote count, which seemed very strange in most elections. Jeff wrote a very strong editorial about the lack of transparency and freedom of information as the backbone of democracy. The principal did not like what he wrote. He was called into the office of the principal with his co-editor-in-chief, Ms. Tahir, and the principal said, "I want you to offer apology to the school. This is for covering the election," which seems like quite absurd. But he came home that night, told us what it was, and we knew that having the principal not like your son is not a good idea. But he, with Mizba, agreed to do an apology. They did over the loudspeaker system of the school. They did it. The principal called him back about 2 hours later and said, "I don't think everybody heard it. I want you to make a second apology." That's when they said no. The principal was furious that they would not make a second apology, which seemed incredible. He went and took the computers from the school newspaper, locked them up, locked the doors to the school newspaper, and shut down the paper. The union leader, fortunately, actually had a journalist on site at the school covering something else and wrote a full, on the front page, about what was going on. It also got picked up as, frankly, national news, and eventually made its way into being in 2 books of journalism. Due to the pressure, frankly, of the union leader, the papers were reopened. I'm not saying that the principal was happy with my son, and I did think about for a while how homeschooling would be. But I can tell you that Jeff got firsthand the power of what was the rights in the First Amendment and the respect and what was needed. We are all here to respect the rights of the First Amendment. I have the pleasure today of introducing to our guest speaker, Jonathan Martin. Jonathan is a political correspondent for the New York Times and a political analyst for CNN. Prior to joining the Times in 2013, he was a senior political writer for Politico. He covered the 2008 and 2012 presidential campaigns and reported from across the globe as a White House correspondent during the Obama administration. His work has been featured in the New Republic, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. Most recently, Martin is the co-author of the New York Times bestseller, This Will Not Pass: Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. His book lays bare the extent of how deep political divisions are in our country and have they become. He illustrates how the struggle for control from both parties has escalated American politics from extreme rhetoric to violence and threatens to unravel our very democratic system. Amy Walter, the publisher and editor-in-chief of Politico, calls Jonathan Martin one of the best sourced, most insightful and honest chroniclers of American politics. She said this book takes not only those through the harrowing days and the final days of the Trump era, he is the first to deeply explore the central tension of President Biden's presidency thus far. The man who is trying to balance national reconciliation with his aspirations to craft a presidential of grand and lasting impact. The writing, full of lush details and newsy nuggets, allows the reader an in-the-room where it happened experience. We're very fortunate today to have Jonathan Martin with us. Jonathan.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that excessively kind introduction. It's great to be back in New Hampshire and especially back here at the IOP. I was actually here recently. I was here over the summer. My co-author Alex Burns and I had a fantastic event, Politics and Eggs. Although I will say, having had one of those cider donuts. Where's Neil? I don't know, man. The cider donuts may do better than Politics and Eggs. So 'tis the season in New England for a cider donut. I want to talk about the book a bit, but before I do that, I want to talk about why we're all here today. And thank you, wherever Joe McQuaid is, for the kind invitation, Joe. The First Amendment. And I'm going to focus on the element of the First Amendment that matters the most to me, which is the freedom of the press. I sadly don't bring good tidings on that front with me from Washington today. You know, having covered politics now for the last 17 years, I've been to all 50 states, I've been all over the world, the West Wing, Air Force One, you name it, and I've had a great time doing it. But the most memorable and rewarding parts of my job covering politics have been far removed from the corridors of power in Washington. The best parts of this job have been covering the lawmakers and the would-be lawmakers, including a lot of presidential wannabes, at town hall meetings, on their buses, restaurants, and businesses, and yes, many a New Hampshire house party. In fact, so many of my fondest memories covering politics are in this state, and some of them are actually in this room, in this very building. I think a lot of John McCain when I'm in New Hampshire. I have vivid memories of traveling with him at the very end of the 2008 campaign, flying into the airport in Manchester. He was almost was a surefire loser. I think everybody on the campaign knew they were going to lose. But in the pitch dark, in a very cold night, we all hauled onto a bus and schlepped to Peterborough because McCain wanted to get back to Peterborough one final time for what I think he knew at that point was going to be his last campaign, because this state meant so much to him. And I recall he was there with Curt Schilling, was there before Curt Schilling had his little digression. Joe Lieberman was also there, memorably. And McCain loved that venue so much. He really enjoyed being in New Hampshire. But, you know, McCain obviously is sort of looked back upon with great reverence for all the obvious reasons, his military service and obviously his long career in politics. But McCain had an ego to him. He had no lack of vanity. I'll never forget Schilling did the introduction, and I guess Schilling had stumped previously for McCain elsewhere in New Hampshire, and when McCain took the microphone, he couldn't help but note that the last time he and Schilling were together at some event in New Hampshire, Schilling got all the attention and all the questions, and here's McCain like 2 days before election day 08, he's talking about how the folks here are all Sox fans and prefer Schilling over him. I also remember being in Wolfboro with John McCain when he got, lots of folks in this room will recall the bracelet from the mother of Matthew Stanley, who of course was the Granite Stater who was killed in Iraq, and his mother wanted McCain to wear that bracelet to remember her son's service. McCain, of course, took that bracelet and wore it, I think, throughout the rest of his life, as a matter of fact. And I also remember, on a lighter note, coming up here in the summer of '07, and I think Joe will recall this, right after McCain had his campaign implosion that summer and his campaign was listing, he was out of money, he had laid off most of his staff, and he came and he spoke at Steve Dupree's behest at the Carponi Center in Concord. I think it was a Concord Chamber luncheon. And the press was all there, not because they wanted to hear his Chamber of Commerce speech, but because we were vultures. We were circling the McCain. We were trying to figure out, was his candidacy about to come to an end? And some smart ass in the press corps, it may have been me, asked him, he said, which at this point has a better chance of success, Senator, the war in Iraq or your candidacy for president? And McCain, to his credit, to his great credit, did not snap immediately. He quoted Chairman Mao. He said, "It's always darkest before it's totally black," talking about his own candidacy. Just classic McCain. Fond memories of covering Democrats here too, and you're going to sense a recurring theme. Most recently, in the summer of 2019, our current president, Joe Biden, was down in Portsmouth, and he did a classic New Hampshire stop after a town hall event. He went to an ice cream shop on Portsmouth, and it was thronged with tourists, and he got an ice cream cone, and he came out and he did a little press conference. Imagine this, Joe Biden talking to the press holding an ice cream cone. I know it sounds totally far-fetched. You can't picture it at all. But what sticks out in my mind, being a political junkie in the summer of 2019, is that during that press avail, when he was holding the ice cream cone, chocolate chip, he was asked about the 2020 election and why his candidacy was best for Democrats. And what he said was, if he was the nominee, he could put a lot of states in play that maybe other Democrats couldn't. And one of the states he mentioned was Georgia. And I recall my reaction at the time, the summer of 19, was, Georgia's the deep South. I mean, I know Atlanta's changing, but a Democrat's not going to be competitive in Georgia in 2020. And to his credit, Biden was prophetic about that. Georgia tipped his way, and then a month and a half later, Georgia delivered Democrats control of the Senate when those two seats flipped in the runoff there. And so I think back to that moment of Biden prescience in the summer of 19 in Portsmouth. Another Democrat who stands out here for me is Bill Clinton. I'm too young to have covered the '92 resurrection of his campaign here, but I have memories of covering him as a surrogate for his wife when she was campaigning here. I just so happened to be in Milford on the Sunday before the 2016 Democratic primary. Bill Clinton was speaking at a junior high school down in Milford, and the polls were looking terrible at this point for Hillary Clinton. It was pretty clear where the wind was blowing. And so Bill Clinton took whatever his talking points were at that point, and he just ripped them up and just threw them behind him. Not literally, but he may as well have. And he used his appearance at a Milford Junior High School gym to do a 45-minute gerrymander against Bernie Sanders. He lit up Bernie. The best line he had about Bernie was, he said, "When you're making a revolution, I guess you can't be too careful with the facts." Talking about Bernie Sanders. And this is classic Bill Clinton. Only Bill Clinton would pull this off. He complained that Bernie Sanders had taken Hillary's endorsement from the National Telegraph and pulled out the like one or two paragraphs in the editorial that were positive about Bernie, and I guess trumpeted that in a mail piece or a TV spot. And Bill Clinton thought it was so damn unfair because the Telegraph had endorsed Hillary. And how could Bernie have taken the one good line there about him and put that in his TV spot? And it occurs to me that the former President of the United States, leader of the free world, is litigating what precisely was in the National Telegraph editorial endorsing his wife, and whether it was fair game or not for Bernie to use that editorial. And I just thought that was like the most vintage Bill Clinton, deep in the weeds, well after he left the White House, stumping for his wife, and bitter as hell about Bernie, who, of course, as we know, won convincingly here in 2016 against Hillary. And I couldn't leave out our most recent former president right here at St. A's. Donald Trump in 2016, I think as a lot of you know, unlike most candidates for president, after debates during the primary, he would not send out surrogates to the so-called spin room. Most top-tier candidates don't themselves go to the spin room after a debate. That's kind of déclassé. You have your staff and surrogates do that. You don't dean. But Trump was never one to turn down cameras wherever they were gathered. And of course, in the spin room of a debate here at St. A's and the weeks before the primary, there was no lack of television cameras. In fact, probably more cameras I can ever recall seeing in a primary here because Trump was such a story globally. You had, the 7 Norwegian TV networks descending on St. A's, and Trump was happy to take questions from all 7, by the way. But after he finally finished talking to the various global TV networks, he started walking out. And I followed him out, and I was trying to get a quote for a story teeing up the primary. It was the weekend before the primary, and I think I was trying to goad him into doing a sort of Joe Namath style prediction where he was going to guarantee victory in the 2016 primary up here. And when I catch up to him finally as he's leaving, and this is the beauty of New Hampshire, is that he's leaving the spin room, but you can still go up to him and try to grab a quote, right? And I go up to him, grab him, and he turns to me, he looks at me, he looks over at Corey Lewandowski, another son of New Hampshire, and his then campaign manager, and he says, Jonathan Martin, New York Times, never gives me any good reviews. And it was classic Trump on so many levels, right? Because he wanted to flatter me by recognizing me by name and by my outlet. But he also could not get over how offended he was that my coverage had not been to his liking necessarily, but not because I wrote unfavorably about his deficit plan. No, because my reviews of him were not well, because reviews were all that mattered, of course, to Trump. I say all that because if Trump was accessible to the press here in New Hampshire in 2016, he was much less so to the voters. There were rock star rallies, but Trump won by bypassing the New Hampshire way. There were no house parties. There was no extended Q&A with Trump on the deficit or campaign finance reform. Trump flew in and flew back out. And if Trump is the nominee, I don't think he'll do any more house parties in 2020 than he did in 2016, which is to say none. And I think that gets to the larger challenge that we're facing today when we talk about the First Amendment. I'm up here walking down memory lane for a reason. What I worry about is what I see as a toxic trend that we're on toward delegitimizing the mainstream press. It's not a new tactic. There have been attacks on the media, largely from the right, going back to Nixon and Agnew. It was always an effective applause line, as Joe McQuaid knows very well. It was a tad cynical, but it worked. Even people like George H.W. Bush, who's kind of recalled as the consummate gentleman, had a memorable button that said, "Annoy the media, re-elect Bush," in 1992. What's different now, I fear, is that those who are launching the attacks actually believe them. And they're convincing the voters to believe the same pernicious claims about the press. And if the voters and the Republican candidates don't believe the media is legitimate, why there's no need to do editorial board interviews. There's no need to debate in front of your opponent and have it moderated by a reporter. And in fact, why even give access to the press at all or tell them where you're going as you're campaigning? I may sound alarmist, but look no further than the landscape right now across the country, just over 2 weeks until the election. Doug Mastriano, running for governor of Pennsylvania, a crucially important state on the national landscape, does not have public events where the press is allowed. He runs almost entirely on Facebook Live. If the press tries to come to his events, his staff physically pushes them out of the way. It's a great irony of our time that a lot of these attacks stem from Trump saying things like fake news. Now, you and I know that Trump craved the press more than he hated it. The only reason he attacked the press was because the press didn't always love him back. It was not a matter of doing so out of hatred. It was a matter of doing so out of love unrequited. Nevertheless, though, it's now Republicans who are sort of following his cues, even though nobody liked the press more than Trump. But they actually don't have that same affection. They think it's more effective to run almost entirely through paid media, through living in their silos, and they don't think it makes any sense to talk to the press now, and I think it's a disservice to the voters. I think there are obvious exceptions to this rule. Here in New Hampshire, you have a Senate campaign between Maggie Hassan and Don Bolduc, in which they're both taking questions, doing debates. But I think what's unfortunate is that Bolduc is more the exception than the rule nationally. It's remarkable for me to see, having covered politics as long as I have, to see challengers, who typically are the ones who crave the attention of the press, dodging coverage more than the incumbents, who are typically the ones who are trying to play it safe and not face scrutiny about their records. But it is happening left and right. In one congressional race in Virginia, one of the most competitive in the country, the Republican running against an incumbent Democrat is literally fleeing out of a back door to avoid taking questions from the press. And the reason why is because the obvious question is, do you believe Joe Biden won a free and fair election in 2020? And this candidate does not want to answer directly that question. And we all know the reason why, because if she does answer that question directly and says, yes, he did, she risks inflaming an element of the Republican base that's loyal to Trump. If she says that the election was not conducted fairly and freely and Biden is not the legitimate president of the United States, well, then she risks offending a broader swath of voters in the center. So it's a no-win situation, so instead the answer is to not answer it at all. The larger challenge is that candidates like that would rather operate in what I call a social media silo or a bubble. And they believe it's safer to stay in what the kids would now call a safe space in terms of media, not taking questions at all. And as one former congressman put it, they run these campaigns in bubbles to voters who are in bubbles. And what a sad commentary on these times that we're in, where you have candidates who operate entirely in their own silos because they think that they don't have to speak to other voters who are in those same silos. I should hasten to add, it's not just one party that is doing this. While the Republicans tend to be more likely to dodge the press or any accountability with voters whatsoever, Democrats are doing this as well, most famously so far this midterm in Arizona, where Democrats have nominated a Secretary of State for governor by the name of Katie Hobbs, who does not want to debate her GOP opponent, Carrie Lake, who of course has gotten lots of acclaim and is very articulate. And I think Hobbs obviously does not want to run the risk of debating somebody who was a former TV anchor and could probably perform better on TV. But it's gotten to this point. Earlier this week, the Democratic nominee for governor, Katie Hobbs in Arizona, went to the Cronkite School at Arizona State University, yes, Cronkite after Walter Cronkite, and her campaign kept journalists in a room, prevented them from questioning her, and then she escaped in a freight elevator to avoid any encounter with the press at the Cronkite School of Journalism, that is. In Washington State, Patty Murray, who's been a Democratic senator for 30 years, had a town hall the other night. But if you watch C-SPAN, you saw that her town hall consisted of her sitting next to a local state rep, and the state rep asking pre-screened questions on note cards for the senator, rather than the senator facing questions that perhaps were spontaneous from the crowd that happened to show up that night. I don't want to be cavalier about what's going on here. Part of the challenge that we're encountering are safety threats. There are threats to the lives of our lawmakers today that would shock you. Every member of the January 6th committee has a Capitol Police detail now assigned to them because of death threats. Liz Cheney, when she was running for her renomination in Wyoming over the summer, stopped doing public events in Wyoming, in part because the volume of death threats was so immense that she was not able to campaign in public in that very rural state because they were concerned about an attack on her life. So I don't just want to sort of brush off why some of these politicians are being careful about public scrutiny and public access. Some of them obviously are mindful of these threats, which, by the way, is a whole different speech for a different day, the fact that we're now facing this level of death threats in American democracy. But it's not just about debate access or fewer town halls or not giving the schedules of the candidates' events that day or the next day to reporters. What I worry about is the spontaneous interactions that are the lifeblood of American democracy for the press and for the voter. Being sucked out of our democracy. The lifeblood of every campaign, but especially here in New Hampshire, no state treasures those interactions more. And so many of the best memories that folks in this room have and that I have just talked about are from precisely those spontaneous encounters. If John McCain was taking pre-screened questions in Wolfboro, New Hampshire, he never would have gotten to talk to Matthew Stanley's mother that day. How to address this? I don't have an easy answer, but I think one thing that you could do is, as the voter, as the electorate, is demand more access for the press, and yes, more access for yourself, the voter. The beauty of American democracy is that you're in charge. Politicians respond to the marketplace. They are ever mindful of the marketplace, and you, the voter, are the marketplace. I want to talk briefly about the book that I wrote. I'm going to be signing some copies here afterwards. After that very uplifting speech that I just gave about the health of our democracy, I've got some more happy news. A book titled "This Will Not Pass." We joked that the subtitle was going to be "America's Great National Kidney Stone." That joke works better in New Hampshire than other parts of the country. God love New Hampshire. Simon Schuster didn't go for that subtitle. Love your energy, love your spirit, guys. Let's keep working on that. No, Alex, my co-author, and I set out in 2020 to do a campaign book. We thought 2020 was going to be a fascinating campaign and that we ought to do a big chronicle of it. All of us have read the great campaign books of the past, so many of which are set here in New Hampshire, and fantastic stories that the state produces. Well, it turned out at the end of 2020 that it was going to be pretty damn hard to do a campaign book, and the reason why was self-evident. Most campaign books, as you know, typically end in 2 hotel suites. There's a winner and there's a loser, all right? And there's a phone call that's typically made in the bathroom or the bedroom of the hotel suite from the loser to the winner. And that call typically goes something like, I want to congratulate you on your victory. I'll be praying for you and our great nation. And how soon can I hang up this damn phone? And of course, the call leaks, the concession leaks immediately. The networks all break in. There's tears of joy. There's tears of sadness in those 2 hotel suites. Both entourages go downstairs to a hotel ballroom. There's 2 speeches given. There's balloons. There's streamers. There's music. There's hopefully an open bar. And then we all go on to the inauguration, and the book ends. It was impossible to do that kind of a book about this campaign because there was no such ending. So it became obvious to us after the election that we had to go bigger. And then I was in the Capitol on January 6th. I was evacuated with the entire U.S. Senate from the Capitol. And we have a whole chapter in the book about that day. And that is when we went back to Simon & Schuster and said, guys, we just can't do a campaign book. This moment is too significant. This period is too consequential in American history. We need to do a history of this stress test of American democracy, this period during which all of our institutions were challenged and put under great strain. And capture these years, 2020 and 21, through the prism of the highest levels of both political parties. And that's what we did, and that's what's in this book. We hope that it is the first draft of a history that we think is going to be chronicled again and again in decades to come. And we sure hope the historians will look at our book as one of the first building blocks to work from when it comes to capturing those 2 tumultuous years in American political history. So with that, let me say thank you again for having me, Joe McQuaid especially, and Neil Levesque, the king of the IOPs here somewhere. Thank you, Neil. And I'll be signing books over here. Thanks so much. And I'm sorry to be a downer, but I know Joe McQuaid's going to have good news to offer here, right?
No, the good news was Neil Levesque thought that the title of the book was from his history professor on Neil's pages. This will not pass. This is for you, sir.
Thank you. Oh, that's very kind of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
I think the guys up here get the kidney stone joke because we're all 75 years old.
It's an older demo.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
That's really everything. I want to thank Brendan McQuaid for the job on the video, which he's done for 412 years and does a super job doing that while trying to run that little newspaper. So, as Jonathan said, he has books. He'd love to sign them, and we thank you for being here and for all the sponsors who helped us, and for Gilles' nice remarks, and for Jim's. Thank you very much.